So we're going to be starting our webinar very shortly, and while we're just waiting for a few more people to join us, we'd love to know a bit about you. So can I invite you to fill in the poll that our producer Julie is going to put on the screen now? And while you're doing that, I'm just going to share a little bit about Action Learning Associates. We're the UK's leading action learning specialists, and we've been working globally in over 70 countries since 2000. Much of that work is happening virtually, like our webinar today, but some of it is face-to-face. I've personally used action learning with leaders in a really wide range of organisations. So just to share a few of those with you, I've worked with leaders who are mentors at the Body Shop. I've worked with diversity champions at Amnesty International, worked with a wide range of managers across the globe at Heineken, and most recently did a development programme for the Greater London Authority. All of those were different uses of action learning in relation to leadership. And I'm going to be sharing a bit more about a particularly juicy project that we're doing with charity leaders a bit later on in this call. So that was a few minutes for you just to hear a little bit about us and about me and my work. Let's see whether we've got some results from that poll. I'll just give Julie a second to get that up there now. Oh, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for filling that in. So this is great. We've got a really nice mixture of consultants and trainers, some senior managers and business owners and other people. And a lovely split, almost an equal split actually, between different sectors. Again, a really nice mix of people. Most of you have got no experience of action learning, so you come here to learn a little bit about that, I guess. And the rest of you have got a mix of limited, some, and we've got a few very experienced people here today. So that's great. Thank you, Julie, for showing us that poll. So let's take a look at what we're going to be covering in our session today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to action learning. I'm emphasising the word brief there because there's a lot more that we can say about it, but with limited time today, I want to give you a flavour of how it actually works. We're going to look at the particular benefits of action learning for leaders using a case study from a project that we're doing at the moment. We're then going to have a taster of live action learning sessions, so I hope it gives you a bit of a feel for what action learning is like. And my colleague Anita is going to be helping us with that. And then we'll be sharing your thoughts and next steps before we finish promptly in just under an hour's time. I know that we've got people from 3 different continents on the call today, which is fantastic. So it'll be 2 o'clock when we finish here in the UK, but whatever time it is for you, we'll be finishing in just under an hour. If you joined us via a computer or tablet, you're going to be able to interact at key points in the webinar by typing in the chat box. And I'm going to invite you to do that now and just share, what are you hoping to get from this webinar? What's going to make this really good use of your hour of time? So please type in your responses to that. What are you wanting to get from this webinar today? New perspectives and ideas, says Jane. Bit of insight into action learning, Daphne. I think we can definitely deliver that. An overview. People want to think about how they apply action learning to leadership development. Great. Working with diverse groups. And people are thinking about a new way of using action learning. Looking to see if it might be appropriate for a piece of work I'm currently working. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing those ideas. And there are still more coming in. This is great. I'm really hoping that you'll be able to get what you want during this call. And it's possible that you won't because there are a lot of you on the call. And so we're offering a free 20-minute consultation after the call, or any time you want it, with our director, Sonia Antel. So there may be questions that you've got that you want to explore in a bit more depth afterwards. That's part of our webinar as well. So there will be an opportunity to follow up if you don't get your exact question answered during the call. But for now, let's move on and do that first piece, which is an introduction to action learning. The really experienced people on the call, bear with this bit. it's really important we've got some kind of shared understanding of what action learning is here. So what is action learning? It's a structured process with a group of between 5 and 8 peers, by which I mean people at a similar level of responsibility in organisation. So you might have a group of middle managers, you might have a group of chief execs, and they might be people from different organisations or the same one. So that group, which is called a learning set, agrees to meet regularly for a certain number of meetings. So there's a contract, if you like, and a commitment. They're saying this isn't a drop-in activity, we're going to be in this together. And typically groups might agree to meet every couple of months for maybe 5 or 6 meetings. So there's a definite time span on this. And another really important part of that agreement that the group makes is confidentiality, which makes it a safe space in which people can talk, knowing that what they talk about isn't going to be shared outside the group. So what happens at the meetings is that members bring along a real-life issue, something that's important to them, something that doesn't have a simple answer. So it's not something where the quickest thing is to just go and get some advice and implement it. It's something where you're part of the solution and you need to work out what's right in your context, with your skills, capabilities and experience, and taking into account other people around you, the particularity of your situation. And when you bring along your real-life issue and describe it, your colleagues in the group ask you questions to help you gain insight. So you get that in from being asked those questions, not being given advice. And any of you out there who are coaches or who've got coaching skills will know what I mean when I say that by asking people questions and helping them come to their own solution, we're often doing something much more powerful than just telling them what they should do. We're really helping them find a solution that they have a commitment to and that they want to do something about. So action learning is called action learning for a reason. It's not only about gaining insight and learning, it's about doing something with it. And so remembering that action learning takes place over a set number of meetings, that's a really important part of how set members learn. So imagine that you've been to an action learning set meeting, you've described a challenging situation you're facing, and maybe you've shared how you're feeling about it, because emotion is very much part of our emotional intelligence at work. And you've got some clarity, you've got some new ideas as a result of the colleagues in the set questioning you. It's helped you to explore your options, and you've chosen what actions you're going to do. And you've gone away after the meeting and done something with that. And so when you come back next time, you can review your progress. And people often say it's that sense of accountability and commitment to the group that really helps them go beyond their comfort zone and do things which might be challenging. There might be a reason why that was a challenging problem in the first place. Maybe you were unsure of what to do, but you've gone away, you've done something, and you can come back and let the others know what it was. I just want to touch on something else that's a really key principle of action learning, which I've mentioned already. Why questions, not advice? I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, but it feels pretty familiar to me. You've got an issue or a problem and people love to give you advice. What you need to do is, and their advice is often based on something that's worked really well for them in their situation. I think the trouble with this sometimes is that they just don't understand all the complexities of your situation. And no matter how much data they try and gather about it, how many details, they're still not you. You're an individual. So your beliefs, values, skills, capabilities, what's possible in your context is going to affect the solution that you can work. And so other people's advice might be great for them, but it isn't necessarily going to work for you. So that's why we focus so much on questions. It helps you think it through for yourself. And the kind of questions that really invite thinking are, I suppose, what we could call open questions. So questions which don't have a yes or no answer, and which don't have a right answer either. So rather than questions like, why haven't you done this? Or have you thought of doing that? We use questions that really help the presenter of the issue to think. So I guess questions like, what matters to you most about this? So the answer to that might be something to do with, well, the business outcome that I'm looking at, or it might be to do with, actually what matters to me most is that this is something I've been feeling really anxious about doing and I want to push myself to do it. Or it might be, what matters to me most about this is the impact on our clients or customers. Another great question, what outcome do you want? So inviting people to think about the big picture, where do you want to be with this in the future? Another great question, what are you assuming about another person or a situation? We have to make assumptions. We would freeze, we wouldn't be able to get through life if we didn't make some assumptions, but sometimes our assumptions get in our way. And by being asked, what are you assuming and how do you know that, we can check that out. Is this a helpful assumption or is it stopping me? Other great questions, who else could help? How do you think Y sees the situation? Another person. And then, what have you learned from this? And what actions will you be taking to help the person who's presented this issue think about what they've learned and decide what they're going to do next? Now, these are just a few tiny examples of questions that you could ask in an action learning set. And I know that there are probably loads of you out there bursting and thinking, oh, there are other great questions. So this is a moment. Can I invite you to type in the chat box? Are there any other examples of questions that you think are great questions to help someone think? Maybe questions that you've asked or that you've been asked in action learning. Oh, nice one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to you? Thank you, Annabelle. Oh, what's worked in the past? What's already working? What would happen if you did nothing? What are you attached to? What would you do if XX wasn't a barrier? Wonderful questions, helping people to really explore the situation, challenge their thinking. Nice one. What's your biggest fear? And I can see there's another one coming here, so I'm just going to wait for Fiona's to come up. If you had a magic wand, I love that question. What would you do or change? So I think you've got it, and I'm really looking forward to our taster a bit later on. These are all questions that are so powerful. So I'm just going to move on and focus in a little bit on what does action learning mean for leaders? And just to say, when I'm talking about leaders here, I mean people at all levels of the organisation, whether it's a team leader, whether it's a middle manager, or whether it's a chief exec or board member. Leadership is about behaviours. Leadership is about showing your values in real life. And I'd like to share with you a model of leadership that seems to be really resonating with a lot of leaders I'm working with at the moment. It's based on research on over 600 organisations across different sectors in the UK. And it's been extensively tested. There's a great CIPD report on it, which we can send out to you after the seminar. And what's particularly interesting about this research is that it was deliberately balanced in terms of gender and ethnicity. And it asked about people's actual experience with their leaders at all levels. So their team leaders, what's called their near leaders, the people who immediately managed or led them. And it's been tested, and there's strong evidence that the behaviours that this research identified are really powerful predictors of engagement and productivity in organisations. So let's take a look at these. In the blue segment at the top, we've got leading and developing individuals. So the people dimension of leadership. And this was flagged by the researchers as being the difference that made the difference. Of all the factors, the one of showing genuine concern for individuals and teams was the one that was most valued by people who were being led. And other factors like being accessible, enabling and encouraging change were also key in there. Leading the way forward, so thinking about creating a vision, networking, resolving complex problems and facilitating change sensitively. And then developing the organisation, so supporting a developmental culture, inspiring others, focusing team efforts, and being decisive. This is for me like a kind of map of everything that leaders do. And the short answer to how could action learning help a leader with these is that any of these are potentially great areas to bring to action learning. They've all got some complexity in them. They all involve the leader in doing something that's important and challenging. And they are all a platform for development for both the leader and the organisation itself. But having shared that model, I'd like to hear from you again. What do you see as key challenges for today's leaders? This might be with reference to yourself, it might be your organisation, or it might be drawing on your experience with the organisations and clients that you work with. So please share some ideas in the chat box. What do you think are some key challenges for today's leaders? Complexity and change, multiple demands, new technology. An inclusive culture, says Terry. Ambiguity, complexity. Yeah, we talk a lot about people in VUCA's organisations now. Making changes that are difficult for people and including the right people in the discussions. Working across boundaries. The rapidly changing business environment, Diane says. And change of roles. Absolutely. Oh, assumptions that leaders need to be loud and ruthless. Yes, indeed. We can, the leadership model I've just shared is part of a body of thinking that's called post-heroic leadership, which some of you are going to be really familiar with. But the idea that the best leaders are the ones that are ruthless and shouting, I think is an idea that's having its time. Okay, let's look at some of the benefits for leaders of doing action learning. I think first and foremost is a really obvious point. It helps them deal with their real life challenges because it's not about management theory, it's not about abstract ideas, it's about what is important to you as a leader right here, right now, that you need other people's help to resolve. And it also helps really improve decision making. So there's something about the process of being in a group of people who are going to challenge you by asking you questions about your assumptions, about your reasons, that will help you scrutinise, how do I make decisions? Am I basing my decisions on the best evidence? And may also push you to be more decisive. If you're someone who finds it hard to make decisions, having that commitment to your action learning set to take action is really useful. We find that action learning increases people's self-awareness. They understand themselves better, and it builds their confidence. Understanding yourself better, being more appreciative of your own strengths and thinking about how you work around your areas of weakness is a really important leadership skill. Nobody is perfect, or if any of you are out there, let me know because I want the secret. But by becoming more aware and confident in their strengths, people feel stronger as leaders. Practicality of actually doing action learning is a fantastic way to accelerate leaders' coaching skills and also to build a coaching mindset. So a key part of being a leader is to enable, empower and encourage others to take action. Rather than giving the solutions or believing that you should have the solutions, it enables leaders to let go and to say to their other people in the organisation, I don't know what you should do about this. You come to me with a solution. And finally, through the process of working with those other people in the action learning set, leaders can build a network of trusted peers who can offer support and challenge for them and really help not only at the meetings, but in between the meetings. So I'm asserting these benefits of action learning for leaders based on the research that we and other organisations have done over the years to find out what difference does it make. But I'd like to share with you a project that we've been working on recently. It's funded by the Lloyds Foundation, so the charitable arm of the bank, It's for chief execs of the charities that Lloyds Foundation fund. We've got 3 action learning sets in Manchester, Leeds and Merseyside, and we've got more to come. 2 of the sets have finished, 1 of them is ongoing. And each set has met 5 times with a facilitator and then goes on to self-facilitate. So what I'd like to do is to share with you some of the results from the evaluation of the first 2 of those sets to give you a flavour of what the leaders in those groups have got from being in action learning. So what kind of issues have they presented? Engaging staff during change, restructuring, funding, huge challenge for charities at the moment, reinvigorating a board, and that's a challenge as a chief exec because the board are your employers. How do you make a board work well? Developing a strong leadership team, maintaining work-life balance. I'm noticing a few of these are resonating with some of your suggestions earlier. Building partnerships and establishing a new vision. And the feedback that we've got from people about what they valued in the action learning set had some very strong themes. People said strength in being with others with similar issues, a feeling of not being alone, a sense of camaraderie rarely felt elsewhere for leaders in this sector. Great to have space to talk to others in the same job and let our guard down. The mutual respect enabled me to be more honest about things I'm struggling with. So there's a real sense there, isn't there, of the safety of the set and also being able to be safe and vulnerable, being able to admit that you don't have all the answers. Leadership can be really lonely. Action learning is a place where you don't have to be that. The kind of results that people have got practically, leaders said, I've been able to tackle some challenging issues, helping move the organisation on and prepare us for the future. I've taken action on a number of areas where I was feeling stuck, and it's given me confidence to make both subtle and more far-reaching changes within the organisation than I would otherwise have done. So our charity lead was very clear it had made a difference. And in terms of how they themselves had changed, this is really interesting. It's forced me to be reflective and not rush in. And it's enabled me to present my thoughts in a more rounded way. I'm better at standing back and trying to see situations from other angles. I'm developing an approach that asks questions before suggesting. And it's helped me get new ideas and change the way I think. If we went back to that leadership model and to your challenges, I think we'd see that both the business results and the personal development map onto key areas of challenge and activity for leaders now. So that's a sense of what action learning can do for leaders. But I'd really like us to get a chance to dig our teeth into, sorry, that's a rather violent metaphor, isn't it, to explore a real leadership issue. And for that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Anita Sauvage, who's kindly agreed to present an issue which was a real issue for her when she was a team leader. So we're going to be using Act Learning today to take a look back at something with the purpose of helping Anita to learn from the past and think about what she could do for the future. I'm going to hand over to Anita for a moment now, just to introduce herself to you and say a couple of words about herself. So welcome, Anita.
Thanks a lot, Mandy, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anita Sauvage, and as you can hear from the sound of my voice, I'm not British, I'm French, and I've lived in Scotland for 19 years. I'm an organizational development consultant and a coach, and I've been for a very long time. And last year, I left NHS to build my own practice of development and coaching. And I have been trained by Action Learning Associate in 2008. I was in charge of developing a leadership program, so that's also the reason why the subject is so interesting for me. And they, so we were trained, a few group of OD consultants were trained as action learning facilitator, and then we develop it for our leadership program. But from a personal perspective, I found it really, really useful, and I use action learning as often as I can in my practice. And I've joined, and I'm delighted that I joined Action Learning Associate in this summer as an associate.
And we're really happy to have you with us, Anita.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just check. I saw one comment in the chat box from Daphne saying that she couldn't hear Anita.
Oh.
And we've got a request, Anita, whether you could speak a little bit louder or to be closer to the mic. Would you just like to say something?
Okay. Is it better now?
I can hear you really well, Anita. Let me just check whether... And I'm hearing people in the chat box saying that they can hear you fine. That's fantastic. Thank you, Anita.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
let me just introduce people to the process that we're going to use for this taster of action learning. In a moment, I'm going to invite Anita to describe the issue that she had as a team leader while we just listen. And then, when she's ready for some questions, and I'll check in with her on that, I'm going to invite you to ask your question by typing in the chat box. And Julie, our producer, is going to make the screen big so that we can have a few questions up there. We won't have everyone to type their questions, but once we have a few questions, we're going to pause and invite Anita to pick a question and respond to it so that we all listen without typing any more questions. And if we could just go back to the slide for now, Julie, that would be great. So when Anita's ready for questions, you'll ask your question by typing it in the chat box. Anita will pick a question and respond to it while we listen. And then when Anita's ready, I'll invite more questions. We'll repeat steps 2 and 3. And then after about 20 minutes, we'll finish by sharing our reflections. Okay. So that's our process. I'll be signposting us through that as we go. So first, let's start by inviting Anita to just take a few minutes, Anita, to describe to us your issue while we listen. And you may need to unmute yourself, Anita. I'm not sure if you're speaking with your mic off. So tell us about your issue. Oh, I can just see Anita saying that she lost her connection. Okay, so we are going to get Anita back in a moment, hopefully. This is one of the joys of virtual action learning, that sometimes people's connections drop out.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Anita. Oh, welcome back.
What a perfect timing. I'm so sorry.
So tell us about your issue, Anita.
Okay, it's an issue that referred to the past, but it's something that stayed with me since. So I just thought it would be a good example to share and to reflect on. I was a team leader at the time, and I was looking after a team of 15 people. And one member of the team went off on sick leave for quite a few months. That was mainly because of a stress level, as her husband had been diagnosed with cancer. So she was away for almost 6 months, and when she came back, I referred her to occupational health, and we had a lot of discussion. And we agreed to reduce her hours and responsibility until she felt strong enough to resume her full job. So the following 2 months were quite challenging, not only for her, but also for the rest of the team. And that was very much because of her behavior. She was quite stressed And we mentioned loud and ruthless earlier. She often argued with the rest of her team. And that was a real challenge for me. That was really, what do I do? Because I need to care for that lady because of her history, but I also need to look after the rest of my team. So I try a few things, offering her counseling, external counseling, and she tried that. We tried also coaching with her, and we had a lot of discussion. And in the end, because we were also going through a massive organizational change at the time, I was tempted to just find another job for her and to avoid the issue, but I just thought, no, it's not fair on her. So I refer her in what we call capability to try to help her find what would be more suitable for her. And she actually was very unhappy about that. And a few months after, she resigned. And I always felt, guilty and wondering if she resigned because of what I had done. So a slight feel of guilt. Yeah, I think it's a good word for me. But, for me, that was also looking after the rest of the team. So that's the situation. And what I would like for today is really to have time to reflect, on this and what I might do differently if that kind of situation was happening again.
You, Anita.
So I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you. Everybody else has heard Anita. Wonderful. So I'm going to invite Anita to mute her microphone now. And then I'd like you to type in, what question would you like to ask Anita? And as you're typing these in, Julie will turn them full screen so that we can see people's coming up. Some great questions coming here. What was the hardest part of this for you? What would your ideal outcome have been? We've got lots coming up. I'm going to ask people to pause there. Annabelle and Jeannie, please finish your questions. And Anita, I'd like you to scan through those questions that are on the screen, starting with Sonia's. What was the hardest part of this for you? Take a moment and pick whichever question you would like to answer first. And don't forget to unmute yourself. So I'm not sure whether Anita's thinking or whether she's in the process of unmuting herself. Just a word to Julie, our producer. Do we need to revert to the other screen for Anita to go off mute?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Anita, we can hear you.
Thank you. Julie, would you mind now put the main screen again, if you don't mind? Thanks a lot. I was looking at the first few questions that came. The hardest part of this for me, that's a very powerful question. I think there are two things for me that were very hard at the time. One of them is that that was her husband's illness, and I was recovering from cancer myself, and I'm fine. But at the time, I felt even more empathy for that lady, and I wonder how much it was clouding also my judgment and finding so many more excuses for her behavior. The ideal outcome for me would have been that she would not have left. She would have felt happy about it. But maybe at the time, you know, I felt guilty also, thinking that she left, she's not happy. But maybe that was also her time to move on and to do something else. Maybe her priority had changed, and actually maybe the whole process gave her an opportunity to rethink what she wanted to do. And so in thinking that she wasn't happy, so she resigned, that may be also again an assumption I made at the time. Looking back, is there something I wish I had done differently? I guess
I'm just going to invite, sorry Anita, I'm just going to invite you to pause there.
Okay.
You've shared a bit with us already.
Okay.
Oh, sorry Anita, can you mute yourself for a moment? Thank you. I just wanted to pause there because Anita's shared some really interesting information there. And I'd like to, rather than have Anita work through all the questions that are here, just check in with the rest of the group. Is there another question that you'd now like to ask Anita based on what she's just said? Please type in any further questions now, just to give Anita some more questions to choose from. So we've had a few more questions in for Anita now, and again I'm going to ask you to pause on the questions and ask Anita to choose which question now feels most helpful to you to answer. Anita, if you could just pick.
Okay, Julie, could you put the main screen back again, please? Thank you very much. I was looking at your question, Sonia, about helping me become more resilient and responsive. And I think, as I said, I think the most important thing for me was to focus on the present moment, and 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 to focus thinking back, it's true that at the time, I didn't really seek any help from other managers. So that's not something I shared with other people except my own line manager, to try to get more insight. And actually thinking back, I'm thinking at the time I was already in an action learning set, and maybe that would have been a good question for my action learning set. I guess at the time I was thinking that it's so personal, but I wonder how much it was personal to me instead of being personal to that lady. So I think maybe having taken that to the group would have helped, but also maybe, someone earlier asked me if Jeannie, if I had supervision opportunity. And I had opportunity, but I didn't take them. So that's something, reflecting back, that I would work more on, is seeking help and helping other people, asking people to help me reflect on that. So Diane, you asked actually a great question about the other member of the group reaction. That's very powerful, actually, because I'm trying to revisit what happened at the time, and I wonder how much the rest of the team were supporting this lady. I felt very protective of her, but yes, actually, other people, maybe I didn't look at the way people were helping her or not, or challenging her behavior in a constructive way. Okay, so I will pause now.
Well, I could hear some thinking going on there, Anita. So I just wanted to pause to again invite people, based on what you've just heard from Anita, what further question would you like to ask her? And again, I know there are probably more great questions coming, but I'm going to invite you to pause now, questioners, and invite Anita to choose which question she'd like to answer next.
Yes, the questions are wonderful. Can you hear me? Okay, one of the question, you know, you have so many questions and wonderful question. The question from Fiona, what's coming up as you experience it and reflect on it? It's a wonderful, wonderful question. Oh, there are so many things that are coming to my mind. One of them is don't beat yourself because you did the best with your ability at the time. And you know, the human nature is so great in blaming ourselves, you know, what did I do wrong? And actually, for me, as a leader at the time, I needed to think of the group as a whole. And I made the best of what I had in terms of my time and effort and empathy. I cared for that woman and I cared for the other people. So, yeah, I did my best. In terms of what I would do differently as a leader, maybe not try to be a superwoman, not try to please everybody, and try to be more honest and assertive with all the different people. So this lady and the rest of the team, and it's finding the balance between the two, and always think, well, you know, do your best. I don't know if Mandy, if you want more.
Anita, I was just going to say, and if you wouldn't mind muting, thank you. I was just going to say this is probably a good point at which to hold this for now. I could hear from the pauses and the silences, which are very much part of action, and the slower pace of your voice, that some real learnings were coming out there for you. So, as facilitator of this, I'd just like to invite you to say what has been useful for you about this. What are you taking forward? And remembering to unmute yourself.
You're right. You know, for me, it's amazing that just a few minutes and looking at your question, all your question, that's amazing to think about how you can still reflect on it. And for me, what I take from these 20 minutes is really to think that you can always learn from your experience, and you know, you can still reflect on the same situation several times at different period of your life, and you will still learn things about yourself and the person you are. So yeah, that's wonderful. That's what I'm taking from it. And again, that's the do your best, do what you feel is best for you and for other people.
Thank you, Anita. And I'd just like to finish that action learning session by inviting everyone to share in the chat box. What are your reflections now on this? Maybe something that you learned, maybe a piece of feedback that you would like to offer, Anita. What's one reflection from you from doing that work together? It may be something about the nature of working virtually that strikes you. Or it may be something specifically to do with the nature of leadership. So the power of questions over advice, choosing which question to answer. And it is interesting, Sally, to see that this can work quickly and powerfully, even virtually. And that was a really short period of time. I guess one thing that struck me was the power of vulnerability as a leadership quality, and also the power of compassion and the importance of compassion, and recognizing that what we do is never going to be completely perfect. Nicola's saying, being witnessed. These are fantastic reflections. There may be more coming, and that's fine if you want to keep sharing those, but I would just like to move back and thanking everybody so much for those really fantastic questions. Anita, to really gain some insight with that situation. Having had that taster of action learning, and it was just a taste, imagine what that might be like if you had several leaders in a meeting working together in that way over a period of meetings. I'd be really interested to hear from you. How do you now think action learning would be helpful for leaders? And a very strong thank you there from our presenter, Anita, for really wonderful questions. So having experienced that and with your own knowledge, how do you think action learning could be helpful for leaders? So Nicola's saying it's okay to be vulnerable and not to know everything. It reminds me of something which Reg Revens, who invented action learning back in the 1940s, said, action learning is about sharing our ignorance, not our cleverness. That it offers impartial thinking time, Fiona says. Not rushing in, taking time, creating a safe space. And Annabelle's echoing that it would be very helpful for anyone in a leadership position. Yeah. Thinking about things from many angles, that's so true. A lot of your comments are really resonating with what our participants in action learning at Lloyd's said earlier on about what they were getting from it. Again, there are further thoughts coming on this in terms of how you think action learning could be leaders. And while you're keeping those thoughts coming, I'd just like to go back to the slides and share with you just some of the uses of action learning for leaders that we know of at Action Learning Associates. So Julie, if we could go back to the slides. These are just some of the ways that we know action learning can work well for leaders. Cross-organisational, so when you have people working together from different organisations. We've got that with our project because the charity chief execs all run different charities. And an even more exciting and challenging process can be to work with people from different sectors. And again, we have that where we've got leaders from business, charity, and public sectors working together. It really is great for challenging your thinking. We can get very used to being within a certain mindset that's reflected by others around us. Being challenged by someone who comes from a different place can be really powerful. We often see action learning being used as part of a blended leadership development program where there are some workshops, but also the chance for people to bring along their real work issues. It can be really powerful at career transition points. So I've worked specifically with people who are new into their leadership position, where they're on a steep learning curve. We've run action learning on a specific theme. So one example of a themed action learning group was where the theme was about commissioning within the public health and social care sector. And we had people from different organisations, but who were all interested and involved in some way in the process of commissioning services. And finally, for supporting any kind of organisational change, particularly around a restructuring or a merger, it can be really powerful for the leaders of that change to come together and figure out how are we leading effectively through this change? What more could we do? Again, coming back to that engaging leadership model that we looked at earlier on. So we're moving towards the end of our time together. I'm going to be inviting some more thoughts from you before we go. But I just wanted to share with you this very powerful reflection from one of the chief execs who was involved in our Lloyd's Foundation project. She runs a charity for people who are homeless with substance misuse issues. And she said this about the action learning. As a leader, it can be hard when you're so busy to give yourself permission to take time out to do this. Please trust me that it is not a luxury. It is worth every second. You'll leave feeling more effective and feeling refreshed. I recommend it very highly. And that was a real testament, the fact that leaders show up to action learning and carve that time out of their incredibly busy work and home schedules, I think demonstrates that it's worth it because it works. If people don't get something of value from it, there are a million other things that they can do. But when we run leadership action learning, what we see is people really showing up and deepening their knowledge of themselves and their organisation as a result. So I just want to ask you before we go, any final reflections that you would like to share on this process? And if there are any questions that come up for you, I will do my very best to give a 1-minute answer. So open space now to type in any final reflections or questions. Oh, thank you, Jonathan. And thanks to Anita too, of course, without whom we wouldn't have had the session. Thank you so much for all these appreciations. Let me also register my huge thanks to our producer today, Julie, who's made the technology work for us, and some real insights here into how action learning can work virtually. I guess it's worth saying in a very time-strapped world, I think we're going to see more and more of virtual action learning going on, and personally, I find that very exciting. So, a huge thank you. This will hopefully have got you thinking about how you might want to use action learning. And our director, Sonia, would be really delighted to talk with you. We're saying a free 20-minute consultation. She'll stretch it to 22 minutes. It's really a chance just to have a free chat and think more about how action learning could help you or your organisation.